Director Young, Acting Director Young, thank you so much for being with us today. I wish my Republican colleagues cared as much about life when it comes to supporting things like childcare, things like ending poverty, things like ending hunger. Those are also part of ensuring that we support life. So thank you, Director Young, for all of your testimony today and all of the work that you have been doing across the board for the American people. I wanted to say that this budget is largely a bold and progressive budget that recognizes that we need those once-in-a-generation investments in education, childcare, healthcare, infrastructure, and so much more, along with making fair a ridiculously unfair tax system where the wealthiest millionaires and billionaires never pay their fair share. But I do want to focus today on two issues, one where I greatly agree with the president and one where I do not. The COVID-19 pandemic made clear that we must deliver a healthcare system that works for the American people and isn't tethered to employment. I'm grateful that this budget reflects commitments laid out in the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force that I co-chaired and reflected in a letter that I led with over 75% of the Democratic caucus across the ideological spectrum who understand how critical it is to empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices, improve Medicare benefits to include dental, vision, and hearing, and expand Medicare eligibility to 60. Director Young, please speak to President Biden's commitment that Congress should act swiftly to include in the American Jobs and Families Plan these critical issues.
Congresswoman, one, thank you for everything you've done around the issue of health care. The budget is very clear. The president wants to see action, bold action on prescription drug prices. There's a fundamental problem with Americans, not only through their tax dollars with the Medicare program, paying too much for drugs in this country. So we asked Congress to work this year to bring those costs down. We think that will save at least $500 billion. We also want to see action to make sure that all Americans have access to affordable health care. That includes through Medicare and Medicaid, ensuring we have additional dental, vision, and hearing services, but also strengthening the Affordable Care Act, which has already brought millions and millions health care at an affordable rate.
Thank you, Director. Shifting gears, in 2010, then Vice President Biden said this: "The spread of nuclear weapons is the greatest threat facing the country and humanity, and that is why we are working both to stop their proliferation and eventually eliminate them," end quote. Yet the president's budget expands almost every nuclear program proposed by the previous administration. It funds the new nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missile, a weapon that President Obama retired with the full support of the Navy, that then Trump sought to restart, and now this budget gives it its first funding. Is that correct?
Yes. But I also want to assure you we're at the beginning of a process where we're undertaking our nuclear posture review.
That review is very, very important. As you know, just last August, President Biden pledged to bring us closer to a world without nuclear weapons. This is a quote of his, so that the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are never repeated. And yet this budget again extends the life of the massively destructive B-83 nuclear gravity bomb, which has a yield that is 100 times larger than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Moreover, the budget increases funding for the long-range standoff nuclear-armed air-launched cruise missile to a level far beyond what the previous administration's budget suggested would be required. Can you speak to how quickly the nuclear posture review will be done, and be clear about whether this budget will incorporate whatever that review comes up with?
Congresswoman, one, I wanted to let you know the president remains committed to taking steps to reduce the role of nuclear weapons in our national security strategy. So we await the results of those reviews. But even with the reviews, the president will make an informed decision on how we proceed, and they will absolutely be reflected in future budget requests. So you see a continuation of a program, but certainly subject to what those reviews will yield out, and the president will use those reviews to make future decisions.
Thank you so much, Director Young. You know how important this is to me, as well as cutting overall fraud, waste, and abuse out of defense spending. And I hope we can get there. I thank you so much for your service and for all that I know you will do for our nation.